You know that feeling that when you've gone back and forth on a decision and you're going over it so many times, you don't even know what you even think anymore. And then you ask everyone for advice, and then you weigh all the options, stress over making that right choice, and you still wonder, like, what if I get this wrong? We've totally all been there. But if you've spent years second guessing yourself, like doubting your own voice, feeling paralyzed by indecision, there's actually a reason for that. And more importantly, there's a way out of it. And so today I'm going to go over that, show you exactly why you've lost trust in yourself, and then how to break that cycle of overthinking and how to rebuild the kind of self trust that gives you the peace and clarity that you need. Like, no more second guessing, no more stressing, and no more running in circles. So by the end of this, you're going to know how to make those decisions with confidence. Stop looking to everyone else for that approval, and then finally trust that God has given you everything you need to move forward and make this decision and make it well. Okay. So let me just ask you something before we dive in. Like, have you ever noticed someone in your life who seems to fully trust themselves? They make decisions quickly, and then they don't second guess everything, and they move through life with like this quiet confidence, and everything seems to be flowing really well for them. Meanwhile, you're over here debating on like which laundry detergent to use and buy. Like, it feels like a life or death situation, right? Yes, that's what I'm talking about today. That kind of paralyzing self-doubt and second guessing ourselves. And it's not even in these small things, it's like in the big things too, right? You struggle to trust your own judgment. You don't know if you're making the right career moves, parenting choices, or even spiritual decisions. And then you constantly wonder, like, am I doing this right? And if that sounds familiar, I need you to hear me on this. Okay. This is not your fault. And more importantly, there's nothing wrong with you. And so if you struggle to trust yourself, it's because you were taught not to. And somewhere along the way, you learned that your thoughts, your instincts, your decisions weren't even reliable. So let's go ahead and break this down, because when you understand why this happens, you can start actually changing it. And so we have been through years of conditioning. We've been taught to seek out everyone else's approval. So just think about it. Like, we grow up in a world where we are constantly told, like, check in with others before we act, right? You have parents, teachers, pastors, society, they all shape us. And then while some of that is good guidance, I'm not negating that. It also teaches us, though, to look outside of ourselves for validation. And so by the time we're adults, instead of asking ourselves, what do I think? Right? We've been programmed to ask, like, what will they think? And so that really, if you think about that dynamic alone, that could shake your confidence, right? You're worried about what they think instead of what you think. And so also, we tend to pick up this idea of the fear of getting it all wrong, right? Your brain, it sees decision making as risky. And we did talk a little bit about that last week, but maybe you've made some mistakes before, ones that have painful consequences. And then your brain, it's learned, like, making decisions is dangerous. And if you get it wrong, you'll suffer for it, right? So now, instead of making choices with confidence, we hesitate. We don't want to get it wrong. We stall. And then you get stuck. You try gathering every possible piece of evidence and information because you're trying to make sure you never feel that kind of pain again. How many can you feel that? And then our nervous system, it has its own response. Your body goes into a stress mode, in effect, right? And here's something we don't often talk about enough, is that your body actually holds on to those past failures. And then it takes on fear into our cellular structure of our body. Okay, so when you face a decision, your nervous system, it's been taught to react like it's actually a threat. So you're going to feel those things in your body, like a tight chest, a racing heart, or even like some sense of panic. Okay. And when trying to decide something important, that might end up being your body's response. You literally go into protect mode, from making this a mistake. And then, of course, you have the spiritual side of it as well. If you don't fully trust in God for who He's made you to be, you'll struggle to trust yourself. And here's where we need to take this in even deeper because if you don't believe in who God made you to be and to do and your purpose and your significance and your value, you'll always second guess yourself. And so if you secretly believe that you're not equipped, that you're not smart enough or that you need someone else to tell you what to do, you'll stay stuck in that doubt. And so, okay, I've told you all the doom stuff, but I want to give you the good news too. Like, just like self-doubt was wired into you, trust can be wired back in. Okay, so you can retrain your brain, your body, your spirit to walk in unshakable confidence. And that starts with the most important thing, which is trusting in the Lord. Okay. So when you don't trust yourself, it's often because deep down you're not trusting that God is guiding you, that He has made a good decision by choosing you for this task. Okay. And so you're not trusting His leading, and you'll always hesitate. But faith, it isn't built on certainty. The Bible tells us it's built on action. And that part is the part that we always have trouble with, right? We say, I believe, I have faith, but then if you look at your actions, does it match that, right? And that's where we need to start. So let's go ahead and talk about how trusting God is the foundation of trusting yourself and how faith without works is dead. Okay. It isn't just about doing good things, but it's actually about moving forward, even when you don't have all of the answers. And I know that can put us through that stress response. But have you ever prayed and then prayed for direction, waiting for God to give you this clear, unmistakable sign, right? But then nothing happened? Yeah. What did you end up doing? What was your response? You kept waiting, right? And waiting and waiting until eventually you stopped moving altogether. You stopped even questioning or asking or praying for it anymore. You stopped dreaming about it. And I've been there too. We all have. Okay. So I want to tell you, God rarely gives you the whole plan up front. And if he did, most of us would really freak out and quit before we even started, right? I mean, come on. We have all felt that. And here's the thing, faith isn't built on knowing every detail. That's what faith is about, right? Like stepping into it without seeing the physical evidence before your eyes. Faith is built on taking a step without knowing all the things. And so James 2:26, when it says faith without works is dead, that means we don't just sit and wait, we move. Okay. And so if God is asking you to do something, he's asking you to move, to act, right? And so when he's not saying anything or giving us the answer to our prayers when we pray for them, like what if there's not this big, loud voice from heaven where he's like giving you, thus saith the Lord, like do this, right? There's no obvious answer. Well, then maybe, just maybe, he is actually saying, hey, I trust you to make the right choice. I have put inside of you everything you need to make this choice. Think about it. I mean, God is calling you to do something. It means he already believes in you, right? He knows that you've been trained for this moment and that you have all the wisdom that you need to be equipped. And so he's already put everything inside of you that needs to be there for making this decision and to act. So sometimes there isn't this booming voice telling you what to do. Sometimes the answer is in your own still small intuition. And that's what we're talking about today because, so here's an example like in 1 Kings 19, 11, and 12. I love this story because Elijah, he is waiting on the Lord to answer. And so fire comes through, wind comes through, earthquakes come through, but that's not where the Lord was. God came in the gentle whisper. Okay. Sometimes God's guidance is subtle. Sometimes it's simply like the quiet knowing in your heart. Okay. So if you're waiting on a sign, like today is your sign, God trusts you. Now it's time for you to trust in yourself. Yay! I know that's what we all wanted to hear, right? So let's go ahead and break this cycle of waiting and overthinking by taking action right now. Okay. Step one, think of one thing. Like just go ahead and identify something you've been praying about, but haven't acted upon. And it could be a decision, a goal, a conversation that you need to do because you've been avoiding, like something you've been just waiting for clarity on. Okay. And then I want you to do step two. Once you've identified it, I want you to take it to the Lord's feet. Like lay it down before him and say, Lord, I trust you. Like I believe in you to hold my hand as I take this step and guide me. Show me what that next step is after I step out. Okay. Like have a normal conversation with him, show him your fear, and then let him hold your hand as you take that step. Right. And then step three, now it's time for action. And today I'm only asking you to take an itty bitty bitty tiny action toward that big thing. Right. So if it's making a call, writing an email, even just taking that idea and putting it on paper, step out in faith, just one step. Okay. I'm not trying to overwhelm you with the whole goal, just one step. And why does this work? Like faith, it isn't about just believing. It's about moving. It's about putting your action where your mindset is, right? It's like saying, I believe in this so much, I'm going to now act upon it. Right? So the more you act, the more you'll see God meet you there, the more your faith will be increased. And just taking that one step, it builds momentum. It's like that avalanche. It brings bigger steps for tomorrow, but you don't have to worry about those tomorrow because he tells you only to worry about today. So when I first started speaking and coaching, and doing these live streams, I didn't feel ready. Surprise, I didn't feel ready. But here's the thing that I want you to know. If I had waited until I had been fully ready, I'd still be waiting. It really took the Lord saying, you are sinning by not giving away your gifts, to kick me out of the nest. So I didn't even have the faith to bring action. I just felt so convicted. I just stepped out and did it. And then more and more I have done it, it has shown up. But instead, like here's the one small step I did. Instead of taking that big giant step into live streams, I mean, I've been coaching since 2011. But um the one small step, guess what it was? It was downloading the Marco Polo app on my phone during COVID and just showing up little by little to talk with my friends on camera. That was simple, right? But it was terrifying for me. Okay. He didn't give me that full plan. I just knew that that's where he was wanting me to go. And every time I moved and did a Marco Polo and got more confident in it, then I was able to take that next step. And so let me ask you today, like, what is that one small, tiny, tiny step that you can take today? Okay. Because we don't need to take the whole big thing, but we've been talking about trusting God first. And a lot of us don't have a problem with that. And some of us do. But then, a lot of people, we get stuck in this place of not trusting ourselves. And so we pray and we seek wisdom and we believe God is guiding us. But when it comes to making that decision and then moving forward, that's where we freeze. That's where a lot of people freeze. And so I want to ask you this, like if God is asking you to do something, doesn't that mean he already trusts you to make that right choice? I mean, I talked about it just a second ago, but like, I feel like I need to ask again just to let it sink in because God trusts you. Okay. So he believes that you're capable, that you have wisdom, that you've been equipped for this moment. And if he trusts you, maybe it's time to start trusting yourself too. I mean, Noah, he had never experienced what it felt like to have rainfall, but he trusted the Lord and started to act. And then, sure enough, he saved humanity because he did that one thing. We don't know the true impact of our choices and decisions and our actions, but we don't need to know. We just need to do the thing he's asking. So here's the problem. Many of us have been taught not to trust our own voice, right? And so when you've spent years of doubting yourself, it's hard to know where to start. And so that's why rebuilding self trust in these little decisions with something totally simple, learning to trust ourselves in those small decisions first are so important. There's a book by John Acuff called Start. It's a good one. And so that might actually be something motivating for you to read if you love those type of books. But if you grew up in a controlling home, maybe you learned that your thoughts and your decisions weren't even valid. Okay, you have not even learned how to trust in them. Maybe you had a parent or authority figure who constantly corrected you and made decisions for you. and then shut you down. Okay. Maybe they said things like, no, that's not the right way to do it. Like, let's unload the dishwasher and do it again, right? When the dishes get cleaned, anyways, it's the dishwasher's job. Or maybe they said things about, you're getting dressed in the morning when you're a little kid. Like, why would you pick that? That doesn't make any sense, right? Or I love this one because I'm the mom, just do what I said, right? Like, don't question it. But over time, we learn to stop listening to ourselves. We start looking to others for that approval instead. And even now, as an adult, you might find yourself hesitating and you second guess and you wonder if like these decisions, if you're good enough or capable enough, and without even realizing it, you've trained yourself to wait for someone else to validate you before you move. And that's why I put step one, God first, right? Because he validates you. Okay, he trusts you. So maybe spend more time in your word and in prayer and let him validate you than going and constantly asking for approval or someone else's how to get it done. And so I get it though. I mean, I've been there and I had a moment and I'll share with you where I did learn to totally not trust myself, and it changed everything though. It was my big aha moment because when I was a young mom, one of my daughters had severe allergies. And so the doctor, told me to give her Benadryl. And so every time I did, though, her symptoms totally got worse. And then I started to notice like that pattern where the Benadryl actually wasn't helping, it was making it worse. Her rash, she was covered head to toe, totally got worse. So I told the doctor, like, I think she might be allergic to Benadryl. And then you know what he said? And I took total offense, right? Like, that's an enemy of decision making too. But he said, that's impossible. Being allergic to Benadryl is impossible. And I in that one moment just totally made a choice. Like, do I trust the expert and what he's saying, or do I trust what my experience has taught me firsthand as her mother? Thankfully, I totally listened to my own gut. I stopped giving her the Benadryl. And then later, we found out through other means that she was allergic to the red dye in the Benadryl. And of course, now that's common knowledge 23 years later, but red dye wasn't a common knowledge of allergies back then. And so that one moment, it totally changed me because it showed me that sometimes I have to trust my own experience, even when someone in authority is telling me otherwise. Okay. And here's the thing, every single time you trust yourself and get it right, you build that self trust, you build a foundation, right? So that's why I want you to start small. Just meet yourself in the middle and start small and start building that foundation brick by brick. Okay. But if you spent years of self doubt and doubting yourself, you need to start with that small stuff, the low stakes decisions, before you can feel confident in those bigger ones. And so, this is exactly how I taught my daughters how to trust their own decisions when they were little, right? I let them choose what they wanted to wear. And guess what? If they got cold, I didn't have to scold them for what they chose because they learned next time they were cold to bring a jacket. You know, and then the other thing is like I let them feel the pain of some of the consequences. So if they began to gossip and someone's feelings got hurt, they learned the impact of the words, because we read the Bible, they heard things like your words bring life and death. And then that in and of itself gave them the experience to trust the word. Okay. So every decision, it has its natural reward and consequences. And that's a good thing. It's amazing how the Lord has set that up. And this is how we learn what works for us. Instead of being afraid to make a wrong decision, I want you to practice just deciding. Decide quickly and see what happens, right? You'll either get the reward or the consequence, but you won't die. So the next time you have a small decision to make, what to eat, what to wear, which direction to drive home, like give yourself 3 seconds to decide. It's low stakes. You're not going to die. You're just going to see how it turns out. And so once you choose, don't second guess it, just stick with it and walk it out. So that's number 3. Just notice how nothing bad happens when you acted, when you made that choice and you acted it out and you just move forward. Okay. So step 1, make the decision, 3-second rule. Okay. Step 2, don't second guess it, just stick with it. And step 3, act on it, just move forward. Okay. And this simple practice, it totally rewires our brain. Our brain, it builds these pathways. And so it learns to believe like I can trust myself to make these decisions. And so when you start small, you build momentum for bigger decisions. You also learn more about yourself. So I want you to celebrate those decisions even if it feels silly. When you do that three-step process and you say I'm going to have chicken for dinner and then you stick with it and you walked it out, just go, "Ha, I made a decision." Even if at the end of dinner you decided I really don't like that recipe. Well, now you learned something. I don't need to cook that recipe another time, right? But now that you start trusting yourself, you might also struggle with overthinking. Okay. So, and the problem with overthinking, it keeps you stuck. So, next, we're going to go ahead and talk about how to break that cycle of overthinking and taking action with confidence. Okay. Because in the little things, it's easy, right? You just choose what you're going to eat and see what happens. But, you're learning to trust God, you're learning to trust yourself in these small decisions, but when you're stuck, what do you do? And then you start to find yourself like overthinking this area where you're stuck. So you don't know if the overthinking got you stuck or if the stuck got you overthinking, but you're overanalyzing and suddenly a simple decision feels like life or death. I mean, it's crazy what our brains will do to protect itself. And that's what overthinking does. Like it takes something small, turns it into something totally terrifying, and then when you don't trust yourself, every decision starts to feel like it's carrying these huge consequences. And here's what you need to understand: your brain isn't overthinking to torture you, it's totally doing it because it thinks it's keeping you safe. So take the shame away if you've been overthinking or if you're stuck somewhere, okay? Your body's doing what it's designed to do, and that is to protect itself. So thank yourself for it. But here's what overthinking is, okay? It's like overthinking is just fear in disguise. So your brain, it believes that if you just analyze it enough, that decision, it will prevent failure or prevent rejection or prevent regret or whatever it is that it's afraid the final outcome will be. And then here's the second problem with this whole scenario, though: inaction fuels overthinking. So that's why I put so much emphasis on action, on the small things, because the longer you wait to decide, the more your brain will spiral in that doubt. And then before you know it, you're completely paralyzed. You're frozen. And then you're going in circles. You're exhausting yourself, asking 10 different people for the same advice and still doing nothing, right? So if you've ever been stuck in that loop, I need you to hear this right now. Pause and listen. The only way to stop overthinking is to take action. Because action, it gives your brain something real to focus on instead of that endless what if, right? And I know this feeling all too well. Like I once let one small moment shake my confidence for years, and I was stuck for years. Okay. So I managed a coffee shop for my church, and I had what I thought was like this brilliant idea to solve a certain problem. And in fact, it was going to solve several problems in my idea. And so I went through all the right channels. I talked and got an approval from all the right people above me and staff. And what I didn't know and caught me blindsided was one person didn't like the idea, and it was a senior pastor. They made one single comment that completely shut everything down. And later now I know that there was wisdom in what they said. But instead of handling it really well, instead of going to that person and having that conversation where that information would have been revealed to me, I let one moment, one comment completely shake my confidence. And then I started to overthink everything. And I second guessed every decision, even the small ones, like what cups should I use to serve the coffee with? And I know that sounds totally ludicrous, but inside of me, it was like, what if I choose the wrong cup? What if someone hates it? What if this is just the most terrible thing I could do for the coffee shop, right? And it totally sounds ridiculous, I know, but that's what insecurity does. It makes small decisions feel terrifying and huge. And here's the worst part: I had friends straight up tell me right away, like, just go talk to him. But I didn't. I avoided it, and for years, I let that insecurity, that one comment, that one situation, like, totally shift everything. And you know what? It didn't even get better with time because I thought that it would. It got worse. And finally, years later, I scheduled the conversation that I had been avoiding. And in 10 minutes, everything I'd been swirling about for years was dismantled because they were able to explain why they made that choice. And it made so much sense. And here I had gotten offended and I had let it shake my confidence, and it had nothing to do with that. But that's what it does. So if you're struggling with overthinking, let's go ahead and talk about how to break this cycle. All right, so step one, think of a decision that you've been stuck on. It doesn't have to be life changing, just something that you've been overthinking. Okay. So, like for me, it was what cups to use when I manage the coffee shop. But for you, it could be, what socks to wear to the tennis match. I mean, whatever. Right. Step two, set a timer for 2 minutes. Yes, only two. Don't give yourself any less or more because it is important. Okay. Step three, make a decision before the timer runs out. So journal the whole thing out, right? Put it on paper. And I promise it on paper will have better effect than putting it in an app, because that action with your hand moving with a pen actually connects to your brain in a way that it can unlock and start trusting itself. There's science on it. Okay. But once you have journaled it out for 2 minutes, by the end of that 2 minutes, I want you to make a decision. Okay. And I heard this recently, like your brain is for thinking, your pen is for remembering and scheduling, and then your body is for acting. So in step five, I want you to schedule a time to act on it and then hold yourself to it. Okay. But it's pretty profound. Like your brain is for thinking. Sometimes we get overthinking because we don't put it on paper and we leave it stuck in our brain, because our brain is worried if we're going to remember it, or if we're going to schedule it, or if we're going to act upon it, right? So take it out of your brain. Once you have been thinking about it, put it on paper to remember and schedule, and then let your body act. And here's why this works. Once you write it down, this decision, it stops being abstract. It becomes real. And then by scheduling it, you take it out of the emotional part of your brain, the fear-based part of your brain, and you put it into logic mode. Okay. So it takes it out of the what ifs and moves it into logic. Okay. So by acting upon it, you're giving your brain the proof that you can trust yourself to make these decisions. And then you add on that proof and you build this strong foundation. So if I could go back in time and tell myself the one thing during all of those years of overthinking and avoiding that conversation, it would be this: schedule the thing and get it over with. Like the longer you avoid it, it gets worse. So if you've been stuck in overthinking, like waiting for that perfect moment, stop waiting. Make a decision, write it down, take the step. So I guess instead of 5 steps is 3, right? Decide on it, write it down, take the step. Okay. So next week, we're going to be talking about the secret to showing up confidently, even when you don't feel ready. So if fear of judgment or imposter syndrome, that's the one I love, has ever held you back, you won't want to miss this, because we're going to address all of that. And so if you want personalized coaching to break down the cycle of self-doubt and overthinking and start living boldly, like reach out. Don't let yourself be stuck there. Let's go ahead and create that step-by-step confidence plan together, okay? I totally believe in you. And more importantly, God believes in you. Like that's who validates you, and that's who their thoughts matter the most. So that's all you need. So see you next week. I loved being here with you guys today. Talk to you soon.